Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about easy and effective ways that you can improve the time you spend practicing. Now, these are definitely methods, they're thoughts, they're philosophies on practicing that can help you identify where your headspace should be at when you sit down to practice your instrument. Now, this is a conversation that I have with every single one of my students when I sit down and talk to them about how to practice. And in order to move forward, we must first understand that there are three main types of practice sessions that we'll encounter as we try to get better at our instrument. The first type of practicing that we experience is what we refer to as maintenance. Now, these are things that we have to do most likely on a daily basis that keep our fingers in good shape, that keep our rhythm in good shape. They ultimately keep us grounded as a player. If our practice sessions are workouts, this is the equivalence of cardio. It helps get the blood flowing at the beginning of each practice session, and it helps get us ready for moving forward, which we'll talk about in a second. These types of exercises would look like fingering exercises or scale exercises or rhythm exercises or right hand exercises. They're things that maybe when we were newer players were really difficult, but now they are things that help us consistently be the kind of players that we know we are. I had a teacher in high school who referred to this type of practicing as trying to herd a basket of kittens, where as soon as one kitten jumps out and you reach to try to push it back into the basket, another one is already jumping out, and you're trying to keep all the kittens in the basket without losing any and without letting one run too far away and get hurt, right? This proverbial basket of kittens are all the things and techniques that we need to do in order to be proficient at the guitar. Lastly, as far as a duration for this, it should take up about a third to half of your practice time. If you're practicing for 30 minutes a day, then it should be 10 to 15 minutes of your practice time. This will allow you enough time to get warmed up, to get comfortable, and be able to move forward into our next section, which is called advancement. The next significant portion of our practice routine should be advancement. It's the whole reason we play an instrument is to get better at it. This usually consists of exercises that help us maybe get better at learning our note names or help us gain more fluidity across the fretboard or help us get faster with our picking, right? And once again, they are things that may eventually become things that we use to maintain. But for now, they're things that are going to push the limits of what we know how to do. These will vary for every level of proficiency at the guitar. But ultimately, we want to spend time pushing ourselves forward. The list of these exercises is a little bit like Pandora's box. Once you open it, you're going to find a lot of different things that you can do to help yourself get better. So, in my experience, there are three schools of thought when it comes to how you should choose to try and advance your playing. The first school of thought has to do with effort. What I like to do with some of my students is I have them create a cycle. Let's say there are four main food groups of exercising. Maybe there's right hand picking speed, maybe there's left hand fingering speed, maybe there's chord changing and trying to get better at that, and maybe there's wanting to learn the notes on the fretboard better. If these are things that you're interested in getting better at, then what I would do is I would create a cycle. I would say first we do right hand speed picking, then we do left hand speed fingering, then we do chord changing, and then we do learning the names of the notes. And what we do is we pick a length of time. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 4 weeks, it could be 6 weeks, but we take our time and we work diligently for that amount of time on one of those things. And then once your time is up, whether it be 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, you move on to the next one, regardless of where you are. This can help people who feel like they get a little stale with things or they kind of lose interest pretty quickly. This just keeps us moving and cycling and kind of provides a little structure to the chaos that might exist in our mind. The second school of thought has to do with people who are goal-oriented. Now, it's important for those people that are goal-oriented to make sure that the goals we choose are attainable. Maybe it's being able to get your scales to a certain BPM with a metronome. Maybe it's being able to memorize a certain amount of licks to use in solos. Maybe it's learning all the notes on the first and second string. Who knows what it is? But the idea is that we set a goal and we make sure that we set time in every one of our practice sessions to achieve that goal. The third and probably most popular way that I've seen students work through and advance themselves is similar to the goal related aspect, but instead of having a goal, it's usually a song that they want to play. Maybe your biggest goal is to be able to play the solo from Stairway to Heaven. What I would recommend you do is I would recommend first and foremost that you find the solo and start learning it in chunks. The next thing that I would recommend you do is I would recommend finding the things about the solo that are hardest to you. Maybe it's knowing where to put your fingers all the way up the neck. If that's the case, then I would say find some exercises that you can do that can help you learn the pentatonic scale in all the different positions up the neck. Then you'll be able to identify each section and where the movements are as you move up the neck, and it will help you feel more comfortable as you try to learn all these licks that are in the solo. If we're returning to the metaphor of your practice time being like a workout, all of the exercises are smaller reps with smaller weights that you do every day to kind of just push you a little further. And then the song at the end would be the bench press. It's the thing that you're trying to get your personal best on. It's the definite ending to your endeavor, which for a lot of people is a really, really important and healthy way to practice, is to make sure there's a point where you can say, I did it, I'm done, I can move on. Now, if we're looking for a specific amount of time that we should be spending on this, it should be about half to 2/3 of your practice time. This means if you are doing a 30-minute practice session, it should be 15 to 20 minutes worth of your time. The third and possibly most stressful way that we find ourselves practicing is what I refer to as preparatory. This means that we're practicing because we have a gig, or we have a jury if we're going to school for our instrument, or maybe there's a studio session coming up. The ultimate idea is that we are practicing because there is something we have to learn by a deadline. The first thing that I want to say about this is that this is why we want to make sure that we are consistently maintaining and advancing our playing. There was a study that was done a while ago where they took professional musicians who played roughly 100 shows in a year, which equates to essentially 2 gigs a week. And at the end of every night, they had them rank themselves on how they personally felt they played that night, only comparing themselves to themselves. They said, oh, if my worst day is a 1 and my best day is a 10, tonight I was a 10. Tonight I was a 3. Tonight I was a 5. Tonight I was a 7. Whatever it is. And what they discovered is that out of all of those 100 shows a year, there were only about 30 of them where they felt like they played their absolute best. Now, how does this relate to practicing? Well, what it tells us is that we shouldn't be aiming for every gig we play to be our absolute best gig ever. We should not be aiming to be our best selves at all times. Instead, we should be practicing in a way that makes it so that even on our worst days, we are able to make it through a gig. We're able to play at a level that would get us paid and still be better than most other people that could be hired. This can, of course, feel daunting, but if you are consistently maintaining and seeking to advance yourself with your practice, it shouldn't be too hard. Now, another personal anecdote as to why this is significant. Back in the summer of 2022, I was actually on vacation, and I caught a call on a Saturday from the Utah Symphony, and they said, Kristen Chenoweth has a concert next Saturday. Can you play? And I was available, and I said, yes, what instruments? And they said, guitar and mandolin. I had never performed with mandolin, nor did I own a mandolin, but I said, okay, I'll do it. And they said, great, you can come get your music on Monday, which meant that I had to finish up my vacation and get home and start practicing. Now, as soon as I hung up the phone with the director there, I called a music shop that I actually worked for at the time and said, hey, do we have a mandolin that has an electronic pickup in it? And they said, yes. And I said, great, I'm buying it. So I bought that over the phone, went and picked it up when I got back into town, drove to Salt Lake, picked up my music, went home, and began my preparatory practice. Now, when it comes to how to handle this sort of a gig, what you have to do is you have to be able to focus. You have to be able to sit down and practice. You can't be distracted. You can't be worried You just have to do your absolute best for as much time as you can allot. You also need to make sure that you dedicate time for breaks. Now, this may take some experience with doing this type of practicing, but the idea is that you need to know when you need to kind of take a step away, get a glass of water, whatever works for you. But you need to know when to give yourself a break so that you can come back with a clearer mind, because it is a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. At some point, you just got to come up for air. And like I said, it may take some experience to know when you need to walk away. The next thing that you have to do is you have to prioritize. You have to find maybe solo sections first, or sections where there are written parts where you know you need to play a certain thing and it's going to be exposed. Those are the things you practice first. It's honestly a little bit of a game where you need to be able to make sure that where you're exposed, you look good. And where you're not exposed, you can kind of flub your way through it a little bit. At this same gig with Kristen Chenoweth, I sat next to a bassist who was a tenured member of the Utah Symphony. And he literally said to me, every single person in this orchestra is going to mess up tonight. The only question is, how bad are you going to mess up and who's going to hear it? That, of course, made me feel a lot better as well. The last thing that I would say if you were doing preparatory practice is to make sure you know what your role is in each song. For example, with the mandolin song, it was a song called Que Sera Sera, and the mandolin part is pretty significant. So I spent a good deal learning how to read music for mandolin and how to play what was written for me there, because I knew that my role in that was going to be play alongside Kristen Chenoweth and back her up, and you're playing the same melody as her, so if you mess up, everyone's going to know. There were other songs where all I had to do was play chords, so I barely even looked at those. Know your role, know what's important, and focus on what's important. Then if you have time, after you've learned those parts, go back and spend some time with the stuff that maybe isn't as concerning. In summary, there are 3 types of practice sessions. There is maintenance, advancement, and preparatory. I'm sure you have experience with each one of these. The most important thing is to be able to recognize when you are in the middle of one of these, and that way you understand what the idea is. Do I want to maintain my level where I'm at? Do I want to advance my level? And how much time should I be spending on that? Or is there a deadline that I need to meet and I really need to just focus? There are 3 last things that I'll say, and I've touched on each of them in each one of these sections, but I want to make sure they're said clearly at the end here. Number 1, when it comes to maintenance and advancement, not necessarily preparatory, effort is often more important than results. It is better to make sure that you are consistently giving effort to advancing yourself or to maintaining your level of playing than it is to have a result or an end goal in mind. Everyone has to find their balance in what works for their life and in what works for their career. Guitar should never be all-consuming. If it is, then you're kind of missing out on a lot of good things in life. It is more important for you to make sure that you are just consistently putting in effort. And if you do that, I promise that you will inherently see results. Number 2, consistent short practicing will do much more for you than sporadic long periods. What I mean by that is 10 minutes of guitar every day will do so much more for you than 3 hours on a Saturday when you have time. This is because your body needs that repetition. That's how muscle memory sets in. That's how we make sure that, again, we're maintaining and advancing. If we're still talking about our practice sessions as a workout, if you were to just lift weights 1 day a week, all you're going to do is make yourself sore. But if you are able to consistently get into the gym for just 20 minutes even, your body will start to build that muscle and recognize the routine, and it will do so much more for you. And number 3, focus. 5 minutes of focused practice is way better than 30 minutes of distracted practice. Guitar is just as much of a mental exercise as it is a physical exercise. If we can train our brains to say, when I have a guitar in my hands, I am focused, I am in the zone, and I'm not thinking about anything else but this instrument, then when we have to play 2-hour-long gigs, it's so much easier because our brain already knows this is where we go to work. Now, that doesn't mean it always has to be that way, because sometimes we also need to play it for leisure or for fun. But ultimately, if we can practice consistently with a focused mindset, we will start to see results beyond what any teacher could give us. And this is coming from a teacher. Inside your brain, you have the power to do whatever you want. You can create, you can build, you can zone out, you can do a lot of things with your brain. So why not use it to focus and get something done? All right. Sorry, this has been a lot of talking, but these are the easy and effective ways that you can take your practicing to the next level. These are the things that separate the intermediates from the pros. These are the things that will take your time with the guitar from I'm just kind of messing around to I'm moving forward and I'm doing something with this. Do you have any practice techniques that really work for you? Do you have things that you wish other people knew about? Do you disagree with any of the things on here? Let me know in the comments down below. I will have an attached video at the end here, which is an older video, but it helps us find some exercises that could really help us with maintenance or maybe even advancement for some of you. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. My name is Mac Wright. We'll see you around.